My name's RJ, and I am a data storyteller. I make DataViz, charts, maps, diagrams, like this image of gazelles colored by threatened species status. A lot of my work is very pictorial, like these Monticello flowers that appear on screen when they bloom during the year. And many projects are mappy, like this clip taken from my short film on the national parks, comparing Zion to Yosemite. I believe that as a storyteller, it is my job to create helpful comparisons for my audience to engage with. My biggest adventure yet is Info We Trust, a book loaded with data stories and inspiration. And it was while promoting this book, a question was posed. How does DataViz see cartography? And so this morning, I'd like to answer that question. Now I'm going to show a lot, and if you want to see any of the high-res images or learn more about any of the work I'm about to show, they're already on a web page waiting for you. So infowetrust.com/NACIS19, and this QR code will come up again throughout the talk. So, how does DataViz see cartography? In many ways. First, cartography is an ancestor. Cartography is mama. Cartography is papa. We all know maps are old. How old? Maybe as old as the star charts in ancient caves. 15,000 years old? Probably older. Cartography is an ancestor. Maps came first. This is one of my favorite old atlases because of its title. Entertainment for he who longs to travel the world. When we turn it upside down, it becomes more familiar. And we can zoom in to see that Sicily, home of the man who commissioned the map, is exaggerated. Keep your clients satisfied. Maps gave birth to data visualization. As we look across the 400-year-old history of information, statistical information graphics, all the way back to 1625, we can see what's been called the first known graph of statistical data. It concerns the longitude problem. If you compared the distance between Toledo and Rome on all the available maps and globes in 1625, you would find that the distance varied quite a lot, and that was a big problem. They were all wrong, by the way. Maps are old. Maps are also inspiring. This map focuses our attention to the Garden of Eden. Everything else is shrouded as terra incognito. This is a fitting metaphor for the cartographic excitement and exploits of exploration and discovery. It reminds me that we still have a lot to understand about the universe and a lot to understand still about ourselves. Where is this? Anybody? Anybody recognize this? Why, it's here, of course. This look at the American West Coast is almost completely wrong. Cartography shows us that evolution of understanding is possible. Things can and do get better. To me, that's inspiring. But even though this map is broken as any kind of functional tool, it is still a beautiful object, and in that way, it's inspiring. There's also something beautiful about early American schoolgirl geography journals. It's a beauty that soars when you learn that these were often constructed from memory as a performance of geographic knowledge. They're just so human. Let's face it, people like maps. By comparison, data visualization is crude. DataViz is simplistic. There's little art market for DataViz. Maps dazzle us as pure aesthetic works of beauty and craft. Cartography is inspiration. And beautiful maps can come right back around and infuse our lives with meaning, just like this map. It's one of many of Tiffany Chung's that expose and chronicle socio-political histories and realities. Cartography is also a hammer, a bullet in the chamber, an arrow in the quiver, a tool in the toolbox. Let me show you what I mean. So at a conference, not unlike this one a couple years ago, I heard somebody say, Gothic cathedrals point towards Jerusalem, stating some kind of geo-orientation fact that I honestly found very difficult to believe. So what does it mean for a cathedral to point you somewhere? Well, a Gothic cathedral orients its worshipers towards the altar, but it also orients it in a geographic direction. And this statement claims that all worshipers are facing the holy city of Jerusalem. So, as a data storyteller, my first job was to go out and get some data. I cataloged French Gothic cathedrals and ordered them by the date of their construction. I scattered them on a map and went around one by one on OpenStreetMap and measured their angles. I took the date of construction, I took the angles, I scattered them, and saw that they all clustered around an eastward orientation. I got excited. But there's no real pattern from across time. So what do? I compress them. I get even more excited because I see that there's some sort of maybe a modal distribution here, and I get, oh my gosh, maybe there's something here. But what does it mean to face Jerusalem? Well, when we look on a map, we can see that France is pretty big. And so depending on where you are in France, facing Jerusalem means something different. I combine it all in a single map. You might call this a thematic map, with all the cathedral orientations and the directions towards Jerusalem, and I learn, do Gothic cathedrals point towards Jerusalem? No. And there's no numbers here. You can just look at it. You can see that that's not what's happening. But something is interesting happening here because you can see all the arrows are pointing towards the east. They're all oriented. Now, my job this morning isn't to reveal the answer to this question. What I want to highlight is the visual exploration. That's what's interesting to me. And so we have these more pure forms of maps, charts, and diagrams. And we have sort of blends. In this way, cartography is a hammer. It's an important hammer, but it's only one of the tools that we use in our visual exploration. I really love thematic maps, charts on maps. Charts on maps are everywhere. Many appear simple, like this map of mine that shows every new American business since 1988. So the map might be simple, but the data is often very, very hard. So even though I don't personally identify as a cartographer, you might convince me to switch my title to chartographer. And Frank Warren in 1919, I think, would be happy with his chartography in 10 lessons. My favorite example of charts on a map comes from the album Statistical. Now, this is, I believe, one of Émile Chasson's masterpieces. It is ticket sales in Paris theaters. And so what you have, if we zoom in to a single region, is a chart for each theater. Each wedge is a year, and each golden year is a year of the big Paris Expo. And so these are outliers. These are years that you expect more attendees. We have a summary line connecting all the red years. And you can see that the summary line, with a labeled average value, does not include the outlying years. I really love this map because of its beauty. The base map is so beautiful and screams through the colors, even though the colors are so vibrant. I love the labeling. I love how the size of the text changes, but what I really love is the layers of comparisons that are possible. You can see which theaters are very popular, which theaters are smaller. You can make comparisons across the years for each theater, and I love that you can see theaters that shut down for a year. You can see theaters that open. You can see so much, and I love that it employs a metaphor for the theater, which is this semicircular shape. It almost represents the audience of the theater. Cartography is an ancestor. Cartography is inspiring. Cartography is a hammer. Cartography is also a cyclops. A cyclops is ancient. A cyclops is intimidating. It can be a monster. And a cyclops has but one eye. What is data but shadows of past reality, encoded memories, history? Here are the eyes of history, closed and blind to the world. But one eye opens, and that is the eye of cartography. All right, so far I really haven't staked out any kinds of definitions. But what is cartography most concerned with? From my perspective, cartography reserves our most precious position channel to represent, that is, encode, a real position from the real world. But history has a second eye. History is not a cyclops. And the second eye is time. The second eye is happy to throw out spatial encoding and repurpose its grid. It prioritizes the showing of time or even more abstract phenomena. This duality is a very old idea. This is data visualization's sacred scroll. Jacques Barbeau-Dubourg created this in 1753. It's 54 feet long, has over 4,000 names, chronicling history. You turn the crank, and you see 140 years at a time. Time flows from left to right, and time is not compressed. Each decade gets the same amount of horizontal space on his scroll. In 1753, Dubourg wrote, "Can't duration be imitated and represented as significantly, as distinctly as space, and can't intervals also be counted by degrees?" But note, Dubourg did not abandon geography. Each swim lane on this chart represents a particular geographic region. This spirit of trying to see time as well as we see geography is echoed through the annals of the history of data visualization. So I want to highlight Emma Willard. Her Temple of Time is iconic. And she wrote, "I divided knowledge into two parts. First, that which could be acquired from maps, and second, that which could not." Emma Willard is a fascinating character, and one of the reasons I like her work with time in particular is because she did it based on two inputs. She was actually a teacher running a school, teaching students, seeing what students needed, but she also had a publisher, and she was waging war in a competitive textbook market, and the publisher pushed her and encouraged her to create new formats that would help sell her books. She sold millions of books. The pinnacle marriage between geography and time may be the synoptical chart. So this is Scaife's History of the Civil War. If we zoom in, we can see how it works. On the horizontal axis is geography. We have the eastern seaboard going from the north on the right all the way down to the south, and then we sort of curl in to the interior states. You can see when each different Confederate state seceded by when their bar turns from blue to gray. And as we move through time and up the chart, we can see that all the action of the war is cataloged. And if we zoom in, we can just imagine the kind of data collection and processing that went into cataloging not only the movements of every corps in the war, but also the strength of every army. Because just like Menard, the width of every bar corresponds to how many soldiers are in the army. Cartography is an ancestor. It's inspiring. It's a hammer. I believe cartography is a cyclops. But cartography is also not there. What do I mean? Scott McCloud is a frequent reference in the data visualization community, and he has this great slide in Understanding Comics. It says, "Time and space are one and the same. There is no spoon. Everything is one." What do we mean exactly by this? So one of the data visualization techniques is the seasonality analysis, where you have a seasonality and you decompose it into a trend, season, and a residual or noise. And when we're doing this kind of analysis, sometimes we can get lost in its abstraction. And what do we forget? Well, we forget that seasonality, that trend, it corresponds to real physical spatial phenomena. It reminds me of my favorite superhero, Promethea, who looks after the immateria, a plane of invisibilia, home to the imagination. Invisibilia is actually where we spend most of our time. What do we think about? We think about power, we think about money, we think about love, we think about maps. Most of our time is spent up here, thinking about the invisibilia. I want to show you and close with a few maps. Are they maps? Are they cartography? That I really love, that blend the borders. So here's Émile Chesson again, with the travel time cartogram. What you see is from 1830 to 1887, as we progress through time and travel gets faster, seas close, land gets closer, time and space blend. Data and geography abstract together, and when they do it skillfully, they do it to beautiful representation. This is one way, crossing space and time, to show the moonwalk. When both eyes, cartography and time, work together, I believe they hunt for the perfect form, something that can let the content, the data, the history, tell its story in the most splendid and helpful way. There is no perfect way, but I believe better ways are always possible. We have our traditional forms, but I believe we can ask, what goes in the middle? What new form can we create? Cartography, an ancestor, an inspiration, a tool, a cyclops, and sometimes not there. My name's RJ Andrews. I'm a data storyteller. This is my first NACIS, and I'm having a blast. Thank you so much.